All right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us today, everyone. As everyone's settling in, we're here for the webinar, How Hiring Fractional Talent Can Slash Headcount Costs by 80%. My name is Scott Strand, and I'm happy to be joined by Chris Meade here, who I'll introduce in just a moment. But first, before we begin, I'd like to just cover a couple of those housekeeping items. I just mentioned some, but today's session is being recorded. It will be shared with you soon via email. Please use the Q&A section to submit any questions for our panelists to answer at the end. And then if you have any questions about after the webinar, please feel free to always reach out to us at marketerhire.com, where we'd be happy to help. So for the agenda in today's session, we'll be covering the following topics. First, we'll start off having Chris explain the rise of his company, CROSSNET, to give some context for the rest of the presentation. Next, Chris will examine some of the lessons he's learned from when he first started scaling his team at CROSSNET. And then we'll break down the main reasons that hiring fractional talent works so well for his business. And then finally, we'll save some time at the end for just closing remarks and then also to answer some of your questions. So without further ado, let me introduce Chris. Chris Meade is a co-founder of the company CROSSNET, the world's first four-way volleyball game that took the world by storm back when he launched it with his buddies back in 2017. He went on to be listed as the Forbes 30 Under 30. And since then, Chris has also created the Founders Club, a community and networking organization that helps connect founders across the world. So thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. This means a lot because I wish I would have had this webinar about 5 years ago when I first made some of my biggest mistakes. And yeah, started CROSSNET out of my 401k many years ago. Went on to bootstrap it from about $5,000 to over $40 million in sales. But along the way, made some really shitty hires that kind of tanked our company. And we've been playing this roller coaster game. But I think we're in a really good spot now, regardless if I'm on this panel for Marketer Hire or not, because of fractional talent. And most e-commerce businesses can't survive with 27 employees like we used to have. So excited to dive into that today.
Yeah, perfect. That sounds great. And yeah, to just kind of kick us off there, can you kind of explain the history of how CROSSNET came to be? This would be great to just give context to the audience about how you got started and just some high-level details about the business.
Yeah, I was kind of like most people joining this call, right? Like I wanted to become an entrepreneur. I was sick of my full-time job. I was working in an office every day where the manager just was kind of just a shitty person, right? Like always on my shoulder, telling me my shirt was untucked. If I wanted to leave 5 minutes early, it was the end of the world. It was just not an environment that 24-year-old Chris wanted to be in for the rest of his life. And one night, brainstormed a bunch of games and products to kind of like get rich and change our life. And 7 hours later, we write down four-way volleyball and assumed that somebody had done it before. Quickly Googled it, could not find a single thing on the internet. And the next day, we went to our local Walmart, like got 2 badminton nets, rigged up the center, created the game on the spot, invited all the homies over, and we literally had like the most fun. I felt like we were back, like we were 12 again. And about 3 weeks later, we quit our jobs, pulled out our 401ks, went to the beach every day in Miami, and started selling our 50 prototype nets that we had. I'd pretty much sell it to you on the beach. You'd take it back to Minneapolis, and I'd start getting sales in Minneapolis like 3 weeks later. And I'm like, oh, it's that guy, Scott. So slowly but steadily, we just kept grinding. And for 18 months, the business went from $0 in revenue to over $2.5 million. And then right after that, it was like 2.5 to 10 million. So we grew like a rocket ship, and nobody had any experience doing this. This was our first e-com venture. It was kind of like finding lightning in a bottle.
Awesome. That's cool to hear. Yeah, that's a great story, inspiring story there. And then like you kind of mentioned in your latest newsletter, after those 18 months, you started to like, at this point, think about hiring out a team. Like, how do you increase growth goals? How do you do more marketing activities? So can you tell us about some of that hiring? Like, what was your thought process at that point?
Of course. I wish I had a better thought process, to be honest. It's kind of like why I created this entrepreneurship club, the Founders Club. Is like, I needed help. I thought I knew what I was doing, but what I was doing was so wrong. And I didn't have a peer group or a mentor or anybody tell me that I was doing this completely wrong. Lucky to come out the other side and with a lot of scratches and scars, but at least we're still standing, which is nice. But yeah, going back to the thought process, right? Business started taking off. It was just the three founders. We all had different complementing skills, which was nice, and which I think is very important in the founding team. I was the marketer and salesperson. My brother loved doing the legal, the CEO kind of. He was also like very good at black hat social media, which I was not, so which was nice. And then my other partner was the engineer and product development. So we had that covered. But we knew we wanted to take the business from 2 to 10. And in order to do that, we needed a team. So I hired a full-on sales staff. So I had 3 salespeople. I built the marketing team out to be 8 people. I had a full-time like brand designer, graphic designer, an events person, a head of performance, a head of social. It's like the squad went from 3 to at one point we had 26 employees just because I thought this was what was the best thing. And to top it all off, love him to death, still a good friend of mine, but we brought in a CFO from a big 4 accounting company who kind of just leveraged debt to build up this team, even though we weren't a ventured team, like a venture backed company. So we were using all of our profit to invest in this team and to pay for this payroll that was well over $1 million a year. We would have had to been cranking out 50 plus million. Like it just was, the math was not mathing, and I wish I would have saw it sooner.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, just to get into that, like lots of headcount costs, and later mentioned this was the big problem. Can you get into any of like the specifics of like where you saw the most inefficiency? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few ones that come to mind immediately. Was we were trying to run an events business for our e-commerce company, and that's just a luxury to have. So we were paying $75,000 a year for an events person who put on probably 10 events a year, if that. I mean, now that's just like such common sense that I'm hiring hourly for an events person to put together an event. Why am I paying salary? Why am I dealing with the management? Why am I paying them insurance and all of that? So that was one. We had a graphic designer on staff for $82,000 a year who came from Foot Locker. He was amazing. But again, now I have we'll get into that, but like, why am I paying that? Had a head of brand who was $72,000 a year, and then a head of performance who was $75,000 a year, who then just reported to the agency that we were also paying. So we were paying him to just take meetings. And in hindsight, it just sounds so stupid. There's been a lot more education about this over the last 12 to 18 months, but back then it was the wild, wild west. And the only knowledge we had was you need to build a team if you want to get to 10, 20, $30 million in sales. I didn't think about all the wasted money we had.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, like you said, there's lots of lessons learned, and that's kind of what I want to like hone in on for this next section. Just like making sure, you can kind of share this experience with our audience.
Of course.
Really like call out like what are some of those biggest lessons that you follow today, wish you had followed a while ago.
Yeah, I think the most important thing has been the kind of understanding of contribution margin and what that means for a business. 12 months ago, that wasn't the lingo. 2 years and 3 years ago, that definitely wasn't the lingo. And so what I was preaching to my team when we were making these hires, it's kind of that classic, hey, if this guy cost me 50 grand and he brings me back 50 grand, at least we break even on the talent. And that is such a terrible mindset to have. If you have 100% margin business and you're just cash flowing, then maybe that makes sense. But in a normally e-com business, especially sporting goods where margins are 15, 20%, if you're lucky, you actually need to bring in 5 times that 50K. So 200K, 250K just to pay for that one person. So if that one person isn't in a revenue generating position, you cannot afford that person without cutting into your profits or the bankroll that you already have. So again, if you're hiring $100,000 graphic designer, that graphic designer needs to be responsible for bringing in $400,000 to $500,000 of cash for the business. If you make those mistakes with 10 people at the same time, your company just gets blown up, and you're either covering your ass with debt or you're going out of business. So that was the biggest impression like that I learned. So now the way we operate, right, is every day I run a daily P&L, profit and loss, on how the company is performing. We have a baseline number that we're trying to hit every day to cover our overhead. Everything after our overhead is strictly profit for the business. And I know that we're going to have a good month or a bad month. Luckily, every month we're now pretty much profitable. Thank God, because we kind of scaled back to this fractional hires. But before then, we weren't. So that's how I'm looking at it daily. And then if I have a surplus of capital over, let's call it a quarter or 6 months, I could then say, hey, I want to allocate this profit to a hire because I know that hire is going to make me 4x on my money. And there's not many hires like that that are worthy of full time, to be honest, in my opinion.
Yep, totally. And something I like that you said previously, I think in your newsletter as well, is just like kind of the importance of treating every dollar like it's coming from your personal bank account. Yeah, anything to add on that from like kind of how you've learned about this, especially through the lens of headcount?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, that message still rings true. It was bootstrapped with their own bank account. So I see a lot of people one of the biggest mistakes I made was the financial responsibilities of the business, of sending out the wires, doing the hiring. I started having a team take control of that, and they were using my money to fund their dreams. They were hiring people to do their work for them, which is just so crazy that it just got that far out of control. But yeah, I think now it's like, as a hiring manager, as somebody running an e-commerce business, you need to be the one in charge of these hires. You need to really have control of how much can you spend on this position monthly. And the nice thing about it is now we're in such a flexible state where August is coming tomorrow. We're scaling down the majority of our workforce for the winter in the fall. Yep. So we're able to flex it on and flex it off as needed.
Right. Yeah. And so as you kind of like shifted, the needs of your workforce and like scaled some of that work back, like how do you think about like balancing kind of the skill level, the quality of the output with like having less resources potentially? I'm curious, like,
yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. In a perfect world, you want to have all A players on your team. Mm-hmm. But depending on where you are in the state of your business, sometimes you just can't afford an A player. And maybe you hire one A player who's a revenue generating role to help you be able to hire eventually more A players. Mm-hmm. But right now it's kind of building out an army of what are the people that you think you can afford and what are the people you can't afford. And for us, it's performance marketing yields more cash. So that's an A player role. Mm-hmm. Graphic design, you could kind of get away with some C-level stuff if you need. On the financial side, it's very, very important, but you could hire a junior accountant instead of a senior accountant to do some stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we definitely emphasize A players in revenue generating roles and C to B players in part-time, kind of less important roles.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important to call out because a lot of aspects of businesses are just kind of this balancing game with the limitations you have set. So yeah, important to think through early on.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. Next thing, I would love to kind of delve into some more practical tips for our audience, specifically around, again, hiring with headcount, and kind of just really go through. I think you have a lot of good insight on what you consider when hiring marketing talent. So would kind of love for you to ask you about that and see, what do you look for when thinking about hiring talent?
Of course. Yeah. So what to consider, right? So for me, we work off a few different systems at CROSSNET and even Founders Club. But most importantly, every year we build a full-on marketing calendar for the entire 12 months. This kind of just sets the baseline of what are the big activations from January to December. And not only does that hold our team accountable, but it holds our retailers accountable. So our retailers will get this catalog of exactly what our marketing plans are. Here's when we're lowering our prices in Dick's Sporting Goods. Here's when we launch in Costco. Here's what we're doing in Target or whatever, right? So that's kind of the way we look at it on that front. And then from there, based on the demand of stuff that we need being churned out, I'll be able to hire adequately for. So for May to July, I have a performance marketer who is getting paid a percentage of spend and also a flat retainer. So he can only get up to, say, $5,000 a month, but he's spending 500, 600, 700 grand a month on ads. So compared to us in the old days, spending $15,000 on these agencies. So I know from that fine window, I have a performance agency. I have an email agency that's kind of on throughout the entire year. So I was able to negotiate that in full by giving them a 12-month contract for somebody I really love. But they scale their work up and down, and there's variable spend per month, which is nice. I will know that in summer months, graphic design is going to be super, super important. And also, graphic design will be super important. While for content creation, for performance art, like creating ads and stuff like that. So that's what we'll use the graphic designer. And then in the winter, we'll use the graphic design to create retail boxes and retail presentation. So we're limiting that. We're no longer doing events pretty much at all. Maybe we'll do one a year. So that will be a flexible hire as well. But I think really it's like rolling up your sleeves and understanding like what are you good at and what are you bad at. But the most important thing is that you don't hire somebody to heal your pain. If you don't understand what's going on with the role, you're just going to be setting yourself up for a lot of pain is from what I've learned, right? Like we've tried to outsource CFOs to do all the financial jobs. But if you take yourself out of it and you just say, hey, it's your job now, you're going to be screwed. Kind of same like why we've been through 7 or 8 different Facebook agencies. Until we learned like how to run Facebook ads ourselves, we just kept getting screwed by other people. So you really need to like kind of understand how the role works before you just hire out for it, because then you're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of combines, like really evaluating your marketing team's current structure, not just like going by it, like, oh, it's what we've always done, but like really evaluating it. And then like, again, like to these bullet points, like really identifying the key roles that drive your business forward. And like you said, at different times of the year, like depending on your business, like that's where you have to think like, what do I need at which point? And then understand like, what's the amount of time that you need to put into it? Like, can you support that yourself or from your current team, or do you need additional capacity? And like, what are those outputs that make additional capacity worthwhile? And so, I think those are like super, super important. And you just said emphasize really well, like really understand the roles, inputs and outputs.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to have those conversations up front. Like if it's only a part-time role for 30 days, like you need to tell these people up front so that they can understand what they're getting themselves into.
Right.
Because then it potentially makes them even work harder, right? Like they're going to bust their ass for 30 days or 60 days to prove that they're the right person. Cool. Then we'll open up for a full-time job.
Yeah.
But I love the prove it model. And also you'll hear a lot throughout e-commerce, but like typically most companies have a 1 employee for $1 million in sales. And that kind of backs out to that like 20% margin that I was talking about. But yeah, so depending on your $1 million in sales, hey, we have, I don't know. We have some money to spend throughout the entire year. So you kind of need to think about it like that. If you're a $5 million company, I just don't see a world where you have 10, 20 people on full-time staff. It just doesn't work anymore.
Yep. Totally. And that was probably one of the biggest realizations is like, not everything has to be a full-time hire. It can be this fractional work. Like there is enough of a network out there. And it's, that like with marketer hire, for example, like where you can find these people who are totally on board to work for a part-time or short-term gig. And that's like, just works for everyone that way. And you can move forward from there.
Yeah, I've also found it just much easier to like. I just don't have the time to go through 100 LinkedIn DMs, right? Or I get 200 applications in the first day. Like, dude, it would literally take me a full month just to interview all these people. So it is nice using something like that where you're just matched with like the perfect person. Because I got to get back to work, right? Like I'm one of the only full-time hires in the company. If I'm spending my whole month interviewing, I'm just blowing my time.
Yep. And that's another great thing to consider. Like, taking things off of your plate, like when you're a small team, a co-founder, like you want to focus on the business and the aspects that you can do super well while letting like an A player Even if they are, if they're full-time or part-time, you want to let that A player do what they do best, and you can do what you do best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also realizing like with these smaller teams, less is more. We used to do it. I could only imagine like we used to have laundry list of 30 things we wanted to do each week. It's like it's just not possible anymore. Like pick the one or two or three big things every week that you need to move forward. Anything else that you get done is great, but less is more, especially in this e-com world. Like do 3 or 4 things really damn well instead of trying to do 60 things. Otherwise, you're just going to cause so many headaches and blow cash.
Yep, totally agree. I love how you framed kind of like the essential versus luxury roles previously.
Yep.
If you could speak to this a little bit, I just love to hear your thought process around like what are the most essential roles to have on your team, on your side, and then what are kind of like those nice to haves, and also how you think of like, is this person a full-time hire? Is this person a short-term hire?
Yep. No, absolutely. I think this also keep in mind, this all frames from CrossNet and Chris Meade's team. If you have somebody who's like a beast at any of these roles, they should probably be doing it if it makes the most sense for your company. But for us, right, like we are a 60% B2B business where we sell into mass retailers. So logistics, right? If we're not shipping in our orders and also getting our inventory in time, we're blowing money. And we have a finite window of selling, which is the summer as a seasonal game. So our operations and logistics need to be dialed in. If we're not shipping orders out to customers on time, those orders are getting canceled. So that role literally, although it's not a revenue generating role, it allows us to sell the inventory that we need to create money. So it is a very, very, very important role. So I've been tag teaming that personally. And then we also now have a flex hire. We used to have a full-time logistic person. I realized that she wasn't doing a lot of work in the 6 months that are considered our off season. So now we just have a logistics hire who flexes on and off in the summer. And it saves us about $45,000 annually, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Finance, dude, your books need to be dialed. It doesn't need to be $150,000 CFO like we had. We're now at a really, really strong accounting hire who's works 20 to 30 hours a week. She has the ability to work more if we need her to do more. But it's just general bookkeeping, sending invoices, monthly P&L, making sure the balance sheet's updated. Doesn't need to be overly complicated. At our scale, right? We're a $10 million company. If you're $50 million, I'm sure you have more things, but most of the people on this call are probably sub 10. Salesperson. That's me right now. I handle all of the relationships personally with the Walmarts of the world, the Costcos. I'm in there telling the brand story, putting the best foot forward. I found that especially in the early stages, nobody's going to care more than the founder. So why not me to tell that story? Creative marketing lead and social lead could kind of go together, but your brand needs to feel cohesive. Whether I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, on a retail box, the thing needs to be cohesive. And in the beginning, the shit was everywhere. One box was black, one box was yellow, one box was purple. Like it looked terrible. We were talking a different way on Twitter than we were on Instagram. So now together, there's a cohesive voice. And I feel like once we made that cohesive voice, things got a lot better for the company. So that creative marketing lead is like a full-time role, and then social is actually part-time. From there, luxury roles, having a performance marketer in-house is amazing. It would be something we used to have, which was nice, but I kind of toned it back when I was able to find an agency that was very authentic. They really lived by the numbers, and they weren't just increasing spend for increasing spend's sake. So I love our agency now. It doesn't require a performance marketer, but I do think the business would be making a lot more money if we had somebody who was living in it every second, 40 hours a week. Graphic designer, you guys should be using an agency. But if you're up there and you need a full-time person churning out 40 hours of assets a week, graphic designer is amazing. Shopify developer, definitely do not need that full-time. HTML, same thing. And PR, I would love to find a PR company that hasn't burned me. But PR should not be a full-time thing that you're paying for at most stages of companies.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great outline.
I mean, dude, I had a PR agency on retainer for $7,000 a month. I had an HT, like all these roles are things that I've hired for thinking I was doing the right thing. And it's crazy to see where the team's at now.
Yeah. Yep. Lots of lessons learned, I'm sure. And yeah, obviously these differ for, based on every individual business. But yeah, that's a great outline of what works for CrossNet.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we're kind of getting later in the time. So just wanted to again take a moment here to be uh just reiterate what the aspects of fractional talent that fits CrossNet so well. Obviously we've mentioned a lot of the content here where it's like it works well because it's certain busy seasons, things like that. But anything else you want to highlight that's again why just hiring fractional talent works so well?
Yeah, I think it's really smart for CEOs and co-found and founders to kind of keep their employee headcount to be a percentage of that monthly revenue, right? Because if your headcount's crushing you when you're not making a lot of money, then you're just going to be spending all your cash and you're going to have a terrible cash conversion cycle. So for us, we scale down headcount based off revenue. In summer, we got more people working for us. It makes a lot of sense. In October and November, when we're not making a lot of money, we're scaling it down. And we're literally we have these relationships with these people saying, hey, there's not orders for you to fulfill. There's not orders for you to work on. There's not demand for the game right now because it's snowing out. So unfortunately, we do not need your help right now. No hard feelings because you were never a full-time hire in the first place. We were just using you as a freelance hire. And that relationship has been so much better. We used to have to make busy work for people. And I was paying people, we were paying $100,000 a month in salaries just for busy work to make the employees feel like they were doing something. When in reality, I was just taking $100K and lighting it on fire with a match. So yeah, this has worked so much better. It's allowed honestly just us to be able to focus more on the one or two objectives every single week we need to push forward. And it makes the business so much more profitable. Every business I will do from CrossNet onward will be using fractional hires. The founding team, of course, better be busting their ass working full time on it. Maybe we'll bring in a few more key players, especially in the sales roles that are kind of revenue generating, but everything else could be fractional.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It definitely gives a lot of flexibility and, helps with affordability, which is obviously so important for smaller businesses and smaller teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to take a moment here to if you're looking to scale your team similarly without kind of incurring these high costs of full-time salaried workers, Marketer Hire helps exactly with this. We kind of go through finding the top 3% of marketing talent. So you're kind of getting the best, but on your schedule while sticking to a flexible budget. We go through a pretty strict process to find that 3% and then match them. We help match with the right size, with the right industry, with the experience that is relevant for that. So I just want to say, if you're interested, if you're listening and you're interested in learning more about freelance hiring, visit marketerhire.com today, and we can help you match with a perfect fit marketer. But yeah, that's kind of really a key to unlocking a lot of that flexibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, with that kind of concludes our chat today. If you have to leave, thanks so much for joining us. But if you can't stick around, we have a couple questions we can go through. Also, feel free to post any questions in the comments or Q&A section now. And we'll do our best to kind of answer those in the next 5 minutes here.
Perfect.
But yeah, Chris, one we had pre set up here. One of the questions from our audience was, how do you identify which skill to hire for first? And we touched on this a little bit, but if you want to reiterate that'd be great.
I think it's important from the founding team to outline exactly what are the things you're really good at and what are the things you're really bad at. And if let's pretend you have three founders, like two other founders, like I do at CrossNet. If all three of us have the same answer as what we're bad at, it's pretty quickly we're able to identify what avenue we should be hiring from. We do first need to kind of do some education to let us know what makes this hire a good hire or a bad hire and what we should be setting for benchmarks for them. That's probably the weak spot. For example, right now in Founders Club, we have two other founders, the e-commerce, the entrepreneurship community I run. We do not have anybody really manning the sales process. I'm kind of the head. I'm driving leads for it. I'm doing a lot of content creation. But I don't have a salesperson following up, sending automated emails, using the CRM, closing leads, all of that. So that's the first hire for my business. And we're actively hiring for that role. The second one will be partnerships, because that allows us to sell sponsorships to also make money. Both revenue generating positions, so both equally important, but the sales role is going to be the number one hire for Founders Club. And we identified that just based off the time that we had to allocate to the business and also our strengths and weaknesses.
Cool. Awesome. We have another question coming in here. I'm going to add it to stage. Does your agency handle creatives, or do you have in-house team? And I know it's fluctuated maybe over the years, but
of course, yeah. So the email design team always does the creative work for me, which is great. I've used some really janky email design teams where I had to provide the creative and it just never looked good. So for email, 100% they should be creating the graphics for you and making the design look really sexy. You can even ask them to one-up it. If there are designs that they're making that you like, whether they're GIFs or something, ask them to export that into a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF, right? So you could use it for socials. Just kind of kill two birds with one stone. And then on the Facebook side, my media buyer currently does not handle creative. I've used an agency in the past that did, which was very nice. I've started handling the creative with my brother, who's kind of like our social guy. And he works with the graphic design team to bang out this creative. Normally we just had a meeting about half an hour ago about these are the 5 or 6 pieces of creative we want for next week. So now we just tasked it out to the graphic design front.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, great. With that, we're coming up on time, and don't think we have any other questions here. So yeah, Chris, just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. Yeah, it was great to hear more about your journey with CROSSNET. And thank you all for joining today and sticking around until the end. If you have any further questions, as I mentioned, feel free to reach out to us at marketerhire.com. Actually, we do have a question. Sorry to start it prematurely there, but one of the questions, how much would you pay someone to manage social media accounts? Get that. Let's get it into
yeah, I would probably, and so that's going to be big question, but I'm assuming that comes with uploading the posts, commenting back to people, scheduling everything out. We've paid anywhere from like $45,000 annually for this role to like $1,500 to $2,000 a month. It's kind of like the prices that we've paid historically throughout CROSSNET. Now we're paying on a per post basis and a calendaring out basis. So they'll calendar out the entire month of what it looks like on all platforms. And then every time they actually manually go in to actually do the post, we'll pay them like $20 or whatever it is.
Okay.
But yeah, it's changed by each person. But yeah, I would earmark anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000 a month.
Cool. Yeah. And it sounds like obviously, when you work with freelancers, like you have that flexibility, like there's often a lot of different payment plan. So.
And I would task whoever freelancer that you hire for this role, put the social media person in the same Slack channel with the graphic designer, so they can be requesting the assets and cut down the middleman. They shouldn't have to go to you to ask you what assets we have this month coming up. Have them actually go create the assets with the designer. As long as you have the relationship with the designer that you have X amount of uses per month or whatever the scope of work is, we kind of have like a unlimited with our design agency. It's been great.
Awesome. Cool. One more question here and then we'll wrap it up. Asked about merging multiple roles into one, or kind of like probably this is asking specifically like how can you have some people handle multiple use cases, so multiple needs for the marketing team? How do you think about that?
I think like in the early days and still 7 years in, running a business, you got to bust your ass. So there's days where you're working 10, 12 hours a day to support your dreams and build it. So for me, I handle the majority of our marketing. I do all of our face-to-face sales with all our retail stores. And I also am handling the logistics these days on the inbound and outbound freight. And so it's good because like I know how much inventory is coming in. So I know how much revenue we could generate off that inventory. And if our finance guy is like, yo, Chris, we need to make $2 million this month, but we only have $750K worth of inventory, the numbers like are like, it's very black and white. Those goals are not obtainable based on the inventory that we have. And we know that we have a 90-day lead time. So there's no chance I'm hitting your revenue targets. So what happens to the business when we're in realistic mode and only make $750,000? So it's good for marketing and logistics to kind of be tied together. And yes, I've been handling all that.
Cool. Well, with that, just wanted to, wrap up today. Thank you everyone for staying till the end with us. And again, thank you, Chris, for your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if anyone has questions, you can contact us at marketerhire.com. We'll see you later. And thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Later.
Yep. See ya.